Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Of course, here with Greg. Got a cool video. Going to talk about the psychedelic industry, but also as it compares to cannabis. Getting a lot of questions. We're going to get Greg's kind of views on where the industry is going, the differences, but also the similarities. But first things first, Greg, how are you?
Hey, Jason, good to see you, man. I'm doing really well, thanks. How about yourself?
Yeah, good, good. No complaints, no complaints. So here, I got a cool quote, and people were asking for really your feedback, your opinion.
Mm,
So I'll read it. And I know there's a lot of kind of segues off of it, but we got a quote. So
sure.
here, unlike cannabis that had a large retail industry, psychedelics, you won't see that. The opportunities in drug development. And I'd love to get kind of your general overview on that statement, but also talk about the kind of comparisons between the two different industries. I don't know where you want to start.
Yeah, no, it's a good comment, right? It seems that a lot of companies in the industry are very focused. Certainly at Tryp, we're very focused on the more formal drug development, aspect of the psychedelic space, right? So in particular, trying to go through an FDA approved pathway to get drugs, approved. It's a more formal process. It involves clinical studies and a whole lot of other things. But at the end, I think that it creates a much bigger opportunity, both for patients and frankly, for companies. So it seems that that's where this industry is headed, a little bit different than the cannabis, space. But not to say there's not going to be some retail component, right? There might be, and I'm sure as you and a number of people, kind of watching this, either themselves or have had, acquaintances or friends who have tried psychedelics sort of in more of a retail setting. So that may be there as well. But I think the big opportunity is going to be more in the formal drug development, side of things, is my guess at the moment.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. And I guess using the kind of JW Pharma example, get some questions about that. Do you want to talk like so
Sure.
obviously,
Yeah.
and yeah, you mentioned retail. I definitely think there's a much bigger cannabis retail segment in the market than there
Mm,
will be for psychedelics. But I would love to talk. So from a drug development side, the JW Pharma approach, and kind of
sure.
obviously you're a
Yeah.
little bit more familiar with that story than
Yeah.
others might be. So it'd be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so Greenwich Biosciences or GW Pharma has been around for a long time, right? They were founded way back in 1999, which seems like an eternity ago, right? Justin Gover was, kind of their founding CEO, and actually turns out someone I spent a little bit of time with. I know him pretty well. They were founded in the UK, right? They were in London. They were public there, and he ended up bringing the company here to the West Coast in Southern California about 6 years ago or so. Of course, what they kind of did, and I think it's a great model potentially for the psychedelic space. They took a cannabinoid, right? So a non-THC compound that was derived from it's in the cannabinoid family and derived from cannabis. But they created then a drug for pediatric epilepsy and took a very traditional drug development, kind of route, multiple clinical studies. They had lots of conversations, of course, with the FDA, and then the FDA ultimately approved this compound not too long ago, about 2.5, maybe 3 years ago, I want to say. So when I first bumped into the company, they were just in phase 3 trials, and didn't really know if they were going to get approval and all that, but they did, and they launched it. And after about a year and a half, almost 2 years of sales, they got to $510 million, and they're helping tons and tons of children with epilepsy, which is a fantastic outcome. So I think there's maybe a lot of similarities between what Justin was doing there at GW Pharma and what we're trying to do, at Tryp, and where I think the main part of the industry is going to, sort of end up. Just as sort of to put an exclamation at the end of the GW story, Justin and his team then ultimately sold that company to Jazz Pharmaceuticals for about $7.5 billion. So it ended up being a great, exit for investors, and probably most importantly, that drug is, approved and helping a lot of children with a very severe disease.
Yeah, no, awesome. Obviously, a great kind of topic. So kind of leading into the next segment of that question was kind of like, where do you see the psychedelic industry in 10 years? Is it going to be a bunch of drugs on the market? Obviously, do you see, we talked through the retail climate a little bit, and I know you had a little difference you wanted to chat about, eating, and how you kind of ingest the, I guess the psychedelic component that you wanted to touch on, but really just wanted to hear where you think the industry is going to be in
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah, good points, and interesting to kind of think about where the industry might be right in 10 years. So I think that there might be a real big difference in the psychedelic kind of world versus in the cannabis space, in that we're pretty certain that the route of administration, right? So how your body actually gets access to the active ingredient of psychedelics makes a big difference in terms of what kind of experience users have or patients have when they're under the influence of these chemistries and when they get in what's called the dissociative state. And right now, everyone's taking a 25 milligram, tablet, so it's an oral, pill, but the experience or the trip that people have is very, very, unique from and different, being from like no experience at all to people who have bad trips to people that are under the influence or in the dissociative state for 10 to 12 hours. So there's a lot of variability and a tremendous amount of room to really tighten up that experience and to make it much more controlled, and frankly have it in a controlled setting where people can be appropriately monitored as well. And then frankly, if people are having a bad experience, that can be managed really quickly and effectively and shut down. And we think that different routes of administration, so either maybe sublingual tablets, maybe an intramuscular or subcutaneous injection, perhaps maybe a nasal approach, maybe an inhaled approach, maybe an IV approach. There's a lot of different ways you could think about administering drugs into a patient. But we think that one of these other routes of administration could be really interesting in terms of controlling the experience and frankly making a much better experience for patients. So that's, I think, is an important note. And then sort of thinking about where the industry might be in 10 years. Yeah, I think that we're going to end up with probably a lot of approvals in a wide variety of different indications with potentially different chemistries, right? So remember, there's LSD, there's MDMA, there's DMT, there's LSD, there's psilocybin, right? There's so many different chemistries to begin with, and then a lot of different indications. We've been doing a lot of work here, as I think we mentioned in an earlier conversation that you and I had. The Tryp is very focused on these non-depression, non-PTSD, non-anxiety issues. Like a lot of people are working in those areas, right? Depression, PTSD, and anxiety. But we think that there's a lot of utility, right? A lot of potential efficacy in patients with other disorders, specifically in pain, and a wide variety of different pain indications, as well as within the eating disorder space, which also includes a wide variety of kind of sub indications. So if you think about that and all the potential maladies that are out there that could be, that could be helped by this, I think you could see in 10 years from now lots of different approvals for many different indications, which would be great, which ultimately would mean that we're helping a wide variety of patients to really, really improve their lives.
Yeah, look, that's a awesome kind of outlook. Next 10 years, obviously fantastic. Look, thanks for covering those questions. I know a lot of people, and I'm sure you get questions too about the comparison to cannabis, but I really think you crushed it. 10 years, bigger focus on pharma here, the psychedelic space for sure, compared to some retail in the more cannabis kind of focus industry. Anything else you want to add on top on kind of comparisons or differences between the industries before we close things off?
Yeah, I think the other thing I would say is that there's a lot of folks in the industry around manufacturing synthetic chemistries, right? So that which means that they're very well controlled. The manufacturing process is very rigorous. It's very well controlled. It's very well regulated by the FDA. And it means that when patients are actually being dosed these drugs, they can rest assured that they're getting compounds that are safe, they won't do any harm, and that are going to be consistent from use to use. So I think all those are other big useful differences between what sort of happened generally in the recreational cannabis space versus what's happening in the psychedelic space. But I think it's all really fantastic in both fields, frankly, of the cannabis space and also now the up and coming psychedelic space, utilize natural chemistries, right, that were around for lots of, many, thousands of years. And now we're beginning to see the utility and usefulness in humans, which I think is fantastic. So, both are really, unique and interesting fields. And I'm really excited to be a part of that movement right now.
Yeah, awesome. Well, appreciate your insights, and I want to invite anyone who's made it this far. If you have questions, about really the psychedelic industry, anything about where it's going, questions you have, we'd love to cover it. We're going to do a Q&A video here coming up really soon. But Greg, thanks so much for joining. This was an awesome video.
Great to be here, Jason. Thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.